Good evening. Welcome back to Losing the Boomer Blues. This is part 27, chapter 19, November 2017. Mary pays Dr. Kline a visit. Mary paid Dr. Kline a visit wearing her sunglasses, but removed them as she entered his office. He was sitting at his desk, talking on the phone when she walked in. He hurriedly hung up and welcomed her. Hi, Dr. Kline. I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd drop in. How are you? I'm doing fine. How's life treating you? Life couldn't be better. I attended my 50th year class reunion with Joe, and right after that, my son married the love of his life. Wow, that's wonderful news, Mary. And Joe and I are becoming closer each day. I'm so happy about being in a loving relationship once again. Just how close are you? Well, intimate? Yes, intimate, but I like to think of it as lovers and friends. That's great, Mary. Nothing helps cure the blues more than love. I'm glad you stopped by to let me know about your son's marriage and your new love. Still wearing your shades? Sometimes I had them on as I walked here, but I'm living more in the now these days and rarely put them on. Dr. Kline's next patient came through the door. He quickly told Mary he was happy she stopped by to let him know that things were going well in her world. Mary thanked him for being there for her. She had made a remarkable recovery, thanks to his support and guidance. She reached into her pocket, took out her shades, put them on, and said, "It's sunny out today." Dr. Kline smiled and said, "Keep smiling. See you around. Don't be a stranger." "I won't. Take care, Dr. Kline." How wonderful the day was. How promising life had become. Mary felt it couldn't get any better. She took her sunglasses off and walked to China Beach. She stood in front of the house where Robin Williams once had lived. She thought, what a beautiful view of the ocean. He had been a lucky man. Chapter 20, December 2017. Jane finds Grace unresponsive in bed. Jane called Mary with alarming news. She informed her that when she had arrived at yesteryear's, the close sign was still in the window and Grace wasn't in the shop. It was unusual because the door was locked and the lights weren't on. She had used her key to enter and went upstairs to Grace's flat. Walking slowly into Grace's bedroom, she feared the worst. Grace was asleep in her bed. Jane tried to wake her, but she wouldn't respond, so she checked for a pulse and detected a faint one. Quickly, she dialed 911 and continued monitoring her pulse until the paramedics arrived. Jane thought Grace had stopped breathing because the EMTs began CPR right away. "I can't believe this, Mary," Jane tearfully cried. Traveler was lying on Grace's bed, whimpering, when the paramedics put her on the stretcher. "I told them that I would meet them at St. Mary's Hospital. They brought her to emergency, and I waited until she was transferred to a private room. I've been here for over 2 hours. Please come as soon as you can. I need you. Grace is in 503. I'm in the waiting area, and I don't know what's happening. I'm afraid." Mary arrived at the hospital within 20 minutes. It seemed like she flew there. She and Jane were in shock, numb with anxiety. They needed to get themselves together and figure out what needed to be done. But they both felt helpless and scared. Pacing the floor in the hallway, they kept staring into Grace's room as they tried to come to terms with what was happening. The nurse and doctor were attending to Grace. Mary and Jane had no idea what was going on in there. Mary said, "Vince handles Grace's legal matters. We need to call him." This seemed serious. She took out her cell and phoned him. "It went to voicemail, Jane. I left an urgent message explaining what had happened and for him to return my call." Jane replied in a low, trembling voice, "Grace doesn't have anyone but us. The paramedics asked me if I was her daughter, and I wanted to say yes." "Don't worry, Jane. We have Vince. He'll take care of things." That's what Grace would want. "Please calm down." Mary's cell phone rang. It was Vince returning her call. He told his mom he had called the hospital to check on Grace. The progress was not encouraging. Mary sadly hung up the phone and said, "We need to be with Grace. I think they'll let us in the room now. Vince and Father John are on their way." Grace adores Father John, but is it really that serious? I'm afraid it is. Jane asks, "Shouldn't we call Ruth?" Ruth and Fran are in Santa Barbara visiting Shirley for the weekend. They began sobbing and hugged each other. They were worried that the doctor couldn't save Grace, but they were still hopeful. The nurse came out of Grace's room and told them that they both could go inside. They stood waiting as the doctor completed his evaluation and put the chart down on the table next to her bed. Just then, Vince and Father John arrived. Father John walked over to Grace's bedside and took her hand. Vince stood next to the doctor discussing Grace's prognosis. She had a breathing tube to help her breathe. The doctor said she had suffered a stroke. He was unsure of brain function, but felt Grace probably wasn't going to recover since she was unresponsive and reliant on the breathing tube. Vince explained to Mary and Jane that Grace's DNR was in place and that her wishes would be honored. The breathing tube would be removed. Mary and Jane sensed that Grace could feel their presence, so they wanted to spend a little more time with her and say their goodbyes. Jane took Grace's hand, and Mary whispered, "We love you, Grace." Father John administered to Grace the last rites. Then he sat down on the bench next to Vince, closed his eyes, and said a prayer. Jane took a tissue from the Kleenex box on the table next to Grace's bed and dried her tears. The doctor removed the breathing tube. Both Mary and Jane understood and respected Grace's wishes. Her life should end as it began, with grace and dignity. They both hugged her goodbye as she quietly slipped away. Chapter 21. The reading of Grace's will. When Vince informed Mary and Jane that they were heirs to Grace's estate, they were stunned. While it was painful accepting Grace's death, it was just as difficult meeting with Vince the next day to settle her affairs. They had never dreamed that Grace would name them in her will. Their emotions were all over the map. Vincent was determined to carry through with Grace's final wishes in a cheerful fashion, just as she had wanted him to. She had always stressed the importance of celebrating life and accepting death. There would only be tears of joy because Grace wanted it that way. She'd requested that Vince read her will immediately because there was a business that needed to be run and a dog that needed to be loved. Vince began reading in a strong, clear voice. "My wishes are filled with love. I'm leaving something near and dear to my heart to my loving friends. I know they will embrace it as much as I have. Therefore, I leave my antique shop and all my possessions to Mary Goretti and Jane Corey, the daughters of my heart." Vince said the entire building, not just yesteryears, will be transferred into both your names. Additionally, all of Grace's liquid assets now belong to both of you. Grace left you everything to be divided up equally between the two of you. There's just one exception. Jane, you now will be the sole owner of the shop's little mascot, Traveler. I know you both are wondering why Grace kept this from you. She didn't want you to know her intentions, as attitudes change sometimes when people learn they're named in a will. She wanted everything to remain the same between you two. She didn't have any living relatives, and she couldn't love anyone more than both of you. When she found out she had a heart condition, she knew she had to get her house in order in case something unexpected happened. We'll continue tomorrow. Thanks for coming today. Ciao.